I never intended to be a political channel. I am not a politicized individual. However, things have gotten too out of hand, too out of control for me to say nothing. My purpose has always been to tell the truth, to speak truth to power, no matter how uncomfortable those truths may be, and to lead people to their own personal freedom. Simple as that. However, we are now in a place where I have seen too much. I have heard too many stories. In just the last 3 days, I have heard hundreds of people's stories who are speaking of how their lives have been threatened, their families have been threatened, their infants have been threatened, there's been assault wished upon them, etc., simply because of their own political view. And so, that being the case, I've now made it my mission to expose exactly what's going on. How do we get to a point where a certain part of the population is so deeply, not just insensitive, so filled with hatred? And I didn't want to call it evil. I wanted to assume ignorance at first, but now I'm realizing no, there is malice here. There is ill will. How do we get to a point where there's a certain subsect of the population that we refer to as the woke left, the leftist ideology, or what is now a liberal, not an old school liberal of the 80s. I'm talking about what it's now morphed into, right? This far left ideology that believes that children should be mutilated, children should be deleted, upwards to the ninth or the eighth month, upwards to birth. Yes, this sounds crazy to some of y'all around the world. This is the current state of what we've allowed this to get to in the United States. And so, that being said, I had an intention on my heart to look for something that spoke to this thing of the parallels between the woke psychology or the woke mindset and narcissism. Something in me was just, I had to do the breakdown because I was seeing too many parallels. I said, this looks like, covert narcissism at its finest, the tantrums that are being thrown, the gaslighting, the manipulation that's taking place, the threats once exposed, all of that reeks of narcissism. And so my prayer was answered where it's actually a new channel I discovered not too long ago, The Jolly Heretic. You guys might know this guy, but I'm absolutely in love with some of these breakdowns. And yesterday, this one dropped. And so I just want to share this with you guys. I want to sit back and analyze, break it down, and get into this conversation. Again, my purpose was never to be political, but now this is affecting every aspect of life. And I'm realizing that there's something far greater going on here that is going to be to our greatest, it's going to be to our greatest good for those who understand what's going on and who can rise above the noise. We're transforming as a people. There's going to be an evolution of humanity. I genuinely believe that, and I see it coming. But for those who cannot see it, you probably will get wrapped up in what's going on, or you might very well become one of those individuals who are sucked into the machine. And so this is a message for the sake of freedom. Free yourself. Stop being a victim. Take responsibility for your life. Create what you will out of your life. And you will have an incredible experience. But if you continue to perpetuate a victim narrative, you will not. So that being said, let's get into this video titled, "What's the Psychology of Leftists Screaming Like Children Over Trump's Win?" Love that title. Let's get into it. By the way, if you want to watch the video just by itself, click the link below and you can do that. But as far as this video goes, it's going to be both of us together. So let's get into it.
In the recent undercover documentary by Hope Not Hate, stroke The Guardian, stroke Channel 4, they seem to rather mock the research that indicates that left-wing people are higher in mental instability than right-wing people. This is something of a cope, of course, because the meta-analyses indicate very clearly that left-wing people are more mentally unstable than right-wing people. Why? Or because what is left-wing? What is to be left-wing? To be left-wing is essentially to virtue signal about harm avoidance and equality. What is virtue signaling? It's a covert play for status. And why do you engage in a covert play for status rather than an up and front fight? Well, it's because you're high neuroticism, you fear a fair fight. And why do you want to take over the world and be in control and dictate to people? It's because you're paranoid, it's because you feel insecure, it's because you want power. So of course left-wing people are going to be mentally unstable. And in addition, we are evolved over a very long time in evolutionary terms to be group-oriented. The dominant group dominates the other group. The ethnocentric group dominates the less ethnocentric group. And so obviously, therefore, being right-wing, let's say being ethnocentric, being conservative, being nationalistic, is going to be associated with being mentally healthy, because things which are genetically healthy bundle together, and being the opposite of that will of course be associated with being mentally unhealthy. So it's obvious why this is the case. Now what you will get therefore is a general tendency, a correlation, is something like 0.3, something like that, between being conservative and being mentally healthy. But what does that do at the tails? What does it do at the extremes? And it means that at the extremes, you're going to get people that are very, very left-wing, that are very, very mentally unhealthy.
And we're seeing that right now, playing out in history. Of course, this is not the first time we're seeing these temper tantrums from toddlers and adult bodies, but it's really manifesting in ways that I think we've never had the opportunity to fully experience due to what social media now is, where that's where most of the eyeballs around the planet are. And it's interesting what he's already broken down so far, which is the correlation between left leaning, or not even left leaning, it's not leaning anymore, they're far leftist ideology and mental illness. And this is something I started to observe earlier on. And I wasn't saying it to be petty, to be honest. I wasn't saying it to be funny, right? When I say these individuals are genuinely mentally ill, some of them even purport themselves to be so. Right now, a lot of them also use it as a means to, self-victimize, where they have all these labels. I'm ADD, ADHD, I'm neurodivergent, this, that, and a third. And it's like, that makes me a greater victim. So it puts me higher in this hierarchy of the woke culture, in essence, because that's their currency. And I don't remember if he talks about this in this video or not, but that's what I've done with my studies, my research upon what's actually been going on with this movement. I'm not just sitting here talking out my backside. These are things that I dig into. I deep into them as much as I can to truly understand the psychology behind it. And again, that's why I started making the correlations of narcissism. Most people think narcissism is just, somebody with a puffed up chest and, beating on their chest like a gorilla, when in truth, most narcissism is it's covert. It's shown in ways where, an individual will feign compassion. They will show themselves to be accepting and loving and doing for others, when in truth, they're using that as a means to get, look at that, my do-rag in made space, as a means to get narcissistic supply. Simple as that. So that being said, let's get back into it.
That are mentally disturbed. And that is what, of course, we are seeing with the response to Trump. What kind of person has a meltdown, has a total meltdown where they can't cope and they just go mad? Two kinds of people: narcissists and people with borderline personality disorder. The research indicates that people who are left-wing are elevated in narcissistic personality disorder and elevated in Machiavellianism. What is narcissistic personality disorder? It is that you are highly neurotic, you are highly mentally unstable, you feel negative feelings strongly, you feel all kinds of bad things about yourself. And so you deal with this by creating a kind of false self where you reassure yourself that you are perfect. In particular, in this instance, you reassure yourself that you are morally superior. You are morally superior because you have the correct views. You therefore are more, if it's in a liberal society, you are more liberal than the last man. And this gives you more narcissistic supply, because people will say, what a morally good person you are, and then you feel good. And so you completely encompass and wrap up your sense of identity with being extremely left-wing and extremely woke, and you gain a sense of superiority accordingly. Deep down, of course, you don't feel it, and therefore, if anything questions the thing which gives you your sense of superiority, the thing which gives and threatens, indeed threatens the notion that you can gain a narcissistic supply by signaling liberalism, that is very dangerous. If liberalism is taken away and we are no longer in a liberal society, narcissistic supply.
This is something I often get these downloads. It's like anytime I do these videos, it's straight from the sources, I like to say. And I started deeping the idea that if racism were to end, hold up. If racism were to end today, if all sexism was gone, homophobia, etc., these individuals would be out of business. The last thing they want is a society that is genuinely a safe space, genuinely a united front. And that's what the world has become more and more of. We're in the safest generation that this planet has known ever. There's never been a time safer than now. There's never been time where things are easier for us, especially in the West. We've never been so prosperous, and yet the activism has ramped up because they need to create an illusion of an issue and a problem to continue to get, again, this sense of validation from the world or their little world that they've created for themselves. And so that's something I really started deeping into to say, oh, wow, they actually want this to continue. Just like pharma, they want the perpetuation of disease because that's how they sell products. Big food, they want you to be they want you to continue to purchase. It's a subscription model. They want you to continue to come back. There's a lot of therapy who it's a subscription model. They won't actually get to the root of the problem. Instead, it will be surface level in order for you to continue to come back and be a reoccurring customer or reoccurring purchases in essence. So that being said, we'll get back into this. Let's see. We only got like 5 minutes left, so I'm gonna let it play out a little bit, and if there's something that I really, really got to get into, I will.
You will no longer get your narcissistic supply, and you will be confronted with the fact that you are simply a shallow, dishonest, lying, insecure person. And you feel negative feelings very strongly, remember. You feel them very strongly. So you won't be able to cope with that. That will send you mad. That will maybe even make you kill yourself, or you fear that it will do so. You know you won't be able to cope. And so therefore, when someone challenges that which brings about your narcissistic supply, you must destroy them. You must make them go away. You must say they're racist. You must just do something to shut them down so you can live in your fantasy universe in which you are important and you matter and you are grandiose and you are superior. So that's the one reaction. And the other reaction is just to go absolutely mad, to express what's called narcissistic rage, to become paranoid and psychopathic, and to express this deep, pent-up narcissistic rage, and getting the emotions out, getting those emotions out of your system, sort of allows you to calm. It all builds up. Basically, you can't regulate it, you can't deal with it, and it explodes. And when you get that emotion out, a bit like crying, then it makes you feel a bit better, and it calms you down slightly because you've expressed all of the pent-up emotion, rather like a child. You getting it out there, getting all the fury out there, brings you back down to a more stable state. And so that is why you see this narcissistic rage. And the narcissistic rage also acts to make people stay away from you, to make people go away, and leave you alone. And therefore you feel better in that way. The bad people will be scared of you and leave you alone if you behave like them.
It's like when you see a toddler, right? How do toddlers express their deepest pains? They throw a tantrum. They cry to like the highest octave possible. They will screech and yell. And that's what we're seeing. When I say these are toddlers in grown adult bodies, I do not mean that sarcastically. I'm not saying that as a joke. I mean that straight up. It may be hilarious, but it's the reality. These are children in their emotions. They have not yet learned how to process emotions. They've never actually had to be challenged before. A lot of them have never, quote unquote, lost in anything. They have gone through life, kind of skirting through life. People have walked on eggshells around them, like most narcissists. And so when it comes to something that is fully out of their control, they can do nothing about, that opposes their own views, then the world has now become their enemy, and they're gonna, screech like banshees and wish death upon people and their families.
This, and also, of course, such people have learned that's how you get what you want, which is more narcissistic supply. So by being angry like that, you are ironically signaling how left wing you are. how emotionally genuine you are, and this is supposed to make people like you even more and realize you're more left wing and give you more narcissistic supply and say what a lovely person you are. So that's why they do it. And the third reason is, of course, they're childlike. They're simply not used to not getting their way. As Jennifer Tweng has argued, we have a generation of narcissists. We have a generation of people that are brought up to get their way, that are never told no, that are never punished, that are never disciplined, that are never prepared for the harshness of life, that are just given whatever they want, anti-bullying policies, and all of this kind of stuff. And so they're simply not prepared for something bad to happen.
So again, what he's saying right there is to say it's not only used as a mechanism to, like, again, distance themselves from those who disagree with them, so are not going to give them supply, but also to send a signal simultaneously to the ones who are like them to, again, place themselves higher in this hierarchy. Again, the woke ideology is rooted, its foundation is in victimhood, right? It's in the victim mentality. So the more of a victim that you are, the higher you are on that pecking order. Like I remember when I was, let's say, 19, 18 years old, right before I made a kind of transition ideologically, I I remember being kind of high on that hierarchy because I was a young black man in America, right? And that's when a lot of these, Black Lives Matter and things of that nature started happening, maybe 22-ish. And all of a sudden I found myself at the absolute pinnacle of the hierarchy because here we were, these, victims. We were the greatest of victims. We were the number one victim. Then all of a sudden, it became a very competitive sport. And now I can't even rank in the system anymore. Like I wouldn't even get a bronze medal in that race. I would have to become, I probably have to cut off my genitals at some point, or at least think about it. I would have to get myself on the hormone blockers. I would, have to completely eradicate my maleness in every way possible. What else would I have to do? God, I would barely be getting bronze even there. There's so much competition. Neurodivergent. I probably would have to be, put on at least 100 more pounds. I would have to do a whole lot to become the greatest victim to at least just rank in this system and this pecking order.
That's why they don't. They're not psychologically prepared for it, and so when it does happen, they, like little children, they can't cope with it, and so they go mad like that. And what they have learned is if they have a tantrum like that, then rather than be punished, they will probably get what they want. So it becomes second nature. Now they're not going to get what they want by screaming and whatever, but they've learned that that's kind of how you do it, and so therefore they engage in it. So that is what we are seeing. Certainly with the men. With the women, what we have is what's called borderline personality disorder. This is people who have a fundamental fear of abandonment, have never really grown up emotionally, and therefore, like children, feel feelings, all feelings, with incredible intensity and oscillate very easily between different feelings. But certainly, they are overwhelmed by unbelievably negative feelings. They're extroverts. They like being the centre of attention, and they're prone towards narcissism, but they're also prone towards the opposite, towards utter self-deflation. So they'll oscillate between these extremes of being, on the one hand, narcissistic and thinking they're great, to, on the other hand, collapsing down, thinking they're awful and fearing abandonment, to being, on the one hand, schizoid and just wanting to be alone and whatever, to being, on the other hand, psychopathic, such that such people can become can get engaged in what's called borderline personality psychosis, where when they're put under stress, they adopt a different self, which is basically psychopathic. And
Again, the two sides of me that are kind of always at odds is the one side that is so logic based and wonders what the hell is actually going on, and then the side of me that understands that this is not about logic. This is, a conversation of conditioning, programming, emotion more than anything else. So when I see somebody filming themselves crying, I think of the logistics of that. I'm like, what was the process of you doing that? The purpose, clear enough, right? What was like, what if you got a retake? Like I saw the skit of a dude who was, doing like, like how they film their videos. It's like, what if you got it? Do you take it like 3 times? Sometimes when I start a video, I might have an intro that I just want to get into. And so I might run it back 10 times, right? Just to get myself in the flow. And then I'm in flow state and I go. But When you're filming a video just crying, and sometimes do you have to run it back? Like, do you have to run the tears back? Do you got to, like, what do you got to reignite those emotions again? What is that? That's narcissism.
Paranoid, as a way of coping with what they have experienced as a frightening, fast life history strategy, unstable, dangerous world. And of course, when they feel the world is that dangerous, they react in a psychopathic way. And being psychopathic is, of course, a way of dealing with an unstable environment. So these are people with no clear sense of self. Most people will move between certain, between this level of anger and this level of kindness, whatever. They can. It's absolute extremes. There's no stable sense of self. They're constantly doubting who they are and what they are. Their goals are unclear because their sense of self-esteem is oscillating all the time between narcissism and self-loathing. So they're completely unstable kind of people, extremely unstable people. And again, they can't cope at all with something bad happening to them, and so what you will get is the most extreme response if they've adopted a kind of narcissistic sense of self to cope with things, and therefore they are left with.
And many of these individuals are buying into the mass media, the propaganda machine that is pushing these messages of the world is coming to an end, and this is it for you. And so a lot of their sentiments are coming from that kind of doomsday apocalyptic sort of ideology, which they buy into. It's a reality for them. I've had, I just put out a video recently based upon this one message, which I got perpetually, especially from other black individuals who are talking about how slavery's coming back and I better be ready to be in them chains because Trump was bringing slavery. Like, first, where the hell did you get that? And secondly, huh? That's what the logical brain would say. But of course, this isn't logic. These are people who've bought into fear mongering. If you consume enough fear-based content, enough fear corn, you will get to a place where you are deeply paranoid. You move through life paranoid. Simple as that. And so these people already have a baseline where, they're unstable. If you put on top of that type of messaging, that type of divisive, destructive messaging, they are royally cooked. So that being said, I'm going to let the rest of the video play out, but I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, or do whatever the hell you want to do. But in all things, make sure you drink more water while I give myself more. So, peace.
And they are challenged, the response will be so overwhelming that they will just reduce down into little children. I mean, this is what the far left are, ultimately. They are being mentally unstable. They're basically children. They're people that suffer from arrested development. And society has made them suffer from that even more by not bringing them up in an adaptive way, and by not challenging them, and by not preparing them for the harshness of life, and preparing them in childhood for difficult things happening to them. Indeed, praising the idea of emotional expression rather than condemning it and saying you're mentally unstable, this is a problem, because of its runaway concern with harm avoidance and whatever. Therefore, people should be allowed to be emotionally incontinent. It should be absolutely fine. Lack of impulse control, lack of structure, lack of coping mechanisms, impulsivity, and that's what we end up with the left. They are like children. They are children. Remember that Kamala, whatever, the reason she couldn't do the concession speech quickly, because she has borderline traits, and so therefore she had to calm down. It takes them ages to get back to some kind of stability. Same with Hillary. Of course, it's going to be narcissistic women that are going to stand to be president. She couldn't calm down in time. Remember what you're dealing with. You're dealing with children. As Tennyson said, an infant crying in the night. An infant crying for the light.
I used to be afraid of the dark, place unknown like a heart in their heart. I used to see my life in the bar. Now the kids unchained, every shackle is lost. 2 steps in the moonlight, 2 step in the daytime. You just know when it feel right. You got a feeling the time's not. See you through those shades that I just threw on. Through my lenses, you just can't do no wrong. I fell in love with myself again. I fell in love with myself. I fell in love with the sunshine. I fell in love with the light. I fell in love with the full moon. I fell in love with the night. I can see the light again. I can see the light. You can see the life in him, but Time is taking a 365, that's a